I am Frederick Gebert. I was born in the year 1871 and died in the year 1925. I was the first president of the Weimar Republic of Germany.
Weimar Germany was governed by a newly written constitution. The Weimar Constitution, agreed at the 1919 conference, was very democratic and extremely fair. All Germans had the right of free speech and equal rights, and everybody over the age of 20 had the right to vote. The parliament made up of two chambers or layers. One layer represented the whole nation and made the nation's decision, while the other represented the regions. The head of state was the president, who was elected every 7 years. The parliament was to be elected every 4 years using a system of proportional representation that made it virtually impossible for one party to get an overall majority. In order to understand the opposition to the Weimar Constitution lies in the Treaty of Versailles. Germany had been forced to sign without being presented at the negotiations, and the terms of the treaty shocked the German people. The new republic had a shaky start, born out of revolution in 1918, but once the Versailles terms were announced, it suffered a loss of confidence, as did the politicians who had been instrumental in its creation. In the year 1923, there was a huge crisis as the outgoing trauma that hit Germany after 1930, when 30% of the workforce became unemployed. But Weimar's survival until 1933 was miraculous, given Germany's economic problems.
Hi, I am Adolf Hitler. I was born in the year 1889 and died 1945. I became Chancellor of Germany on January 30. Once in power, I became dictator in the Germany and took the country to war in 1939. I committed suicide on April 30, 1945, as the Russian army surrounded me in Berlin. I will kill you!
Opposition parties on the far left fragmented after 1919, when Herbert's SPD became the largest party. As moderate socialists, there were the party of the working class and trade unions. Within Parliament, the first nationalist party forcefully opposed to Weimar was the DNVP, formed in 1918 and emerging from an organization called the Pan-German League. Racism was a common feature in these parties. The DNVP was the main right-wing party up to 1928, but the National Socialist Germany Workers' Party, also known as the Nazis, overtook it, appealing to both workers and nationalists. Adolf Hitler became the leader, and with the Nazis, was the strongest in the south around Munich. Hitler then planned to give Germany a strong one-man leadership, which he felt was necessary to restore pride and remove the shame of 1918.
I am Heinrich Brüning. I was born in 1885 and died in 1970. I was Chancellor from 1930 to 1932. I was an anti-socialist, and politician, and monarchist at heart. I opposed the Nazis and underestimated the threat they posed.
Paramilitaries, known as the Fear Corps, and pro-communist militias called the Red Guards, both of which had ex-soldiers in their ranks. Encouraged by the strikes, a communist uprising began in the Ruhr region, where 50,000 people formed the Red Army and took control of the province. Pressure came from outside Germany too. In January 1923, Germany claimed it could no longer afford reparation payments required by the Allies and defaulted. French and Belgian troops occupied the Ruhr, Germany's most productive industrial region at the time, taking control of most mining and manufacturing companies. Strikes were called, and passive resistance was encouraged.
I am Paul von Heidenberg. I was a respected Prussian and nobleman and distinguished field marshal and war supremo from 1914 to 1918. I appointed Hitler as Chancellor in January 1933.
Parliamentary democracy essentially collapsed under political pressure in 1930, following a split in the government over unemployed and other welfare benefits in the aftermath of the Wall Street crash. The collapse of the coalition government in March 1930 marked the beginning of a transition to an authoritarian presidential regime, which was appointed by Hermann Brüning as chancellor. The period between May 1930 and Hitler's assumption of office as chancellor in January 1933 exemplifies all that was stagnant about Weimar. Indeed, from 1932 to 1933, Germany came very close to total dissolution of parliament. The Nazis won over 230 seats in July 1932. Hitler requested the post of chancellor, but this was rejected by President Hindenburg. Hitler then won the vote of no confidence in von Papen's government, so the president avoided appointing him by making von Schleicher the counter. Finally, following the lengthy political deadlock, Hitler made chancellor on January 30, 1933.
I am Gustav Stresemann. I was an influential Weimar Republic politician who formed the German People's Party in 1918. In the new government, I became a foreign minister and accepted the Dawes Plan.
During World War I, many people were employed because of the jobs that were mainly focusing on creating military weapons for the war. But soon after the war ended in 1919, the population began to struggle and there was a growing shortage of everyday goods. Inflation then became a bigger issue for Germany. The government tried to control inflation by increasing personal taxation and cutting government spending. But because of the way Germany's economy was set up, their approaches will only worsen the problem, so the government adopted a policy of deficit financing. Deficit financing is the amount by which government spending exceeds revenue over a particular period of time. This policy was adapted to give the people more spending power, provide work for returning troops, and decrease the national debt. However, due to Germany's needs to pay the war reparations, there was a flaw in this policy. By 1923, trade unions were not able to negotiate a wage settlement with the employees, and those with few or no savings lost much more than those who were living on saved income, which made it more difficult for the people. Not only did people struggle economically, but also socially due to depression, disillusion, and dissatisfaction. But Gustav Stresemann started key decisions and orders the government to cut expenditure, which only led to 750,000 people to lose their jobs. However, Stresemann made programs of public building and industries. Jobs were created.
Where's Gatsby? Where's Gatsby?
The period of 1924 to 1929 is known as the golden years of Weimar, for it was a change for Germany with the emergence of a modern jazz culture and new openness to a wider international influences. These influences vary from jazz, film, and American-style consumerism. The Golden Years saw the development of innovative street theater as well as the growth of increasing activity and sexual promiscuity. Women began to wear their hair short and picked up American habits such as wearing makeup, smoking, and turning away from the traditional feminine behavior. But even the Golden Years showed progression for Germany. Stress in men was greatly criticized by opponents for its policy of fulfillment, which was a compliance with the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. It was also criticized by the Germans themselves because of the invasion of Ruhr. In 1929, Owen de Young, an American banker, reduced the German reparations, but many Germans were dissatisfied with the Young plan because Germany still had to pay an annual sum to the Allies up to the year of 1988. The Nazis launched a violent campaign against the Young plan because Germany was tied to the USA and to international banking. The Nazis wanted self-sufficiency and believed that international banking was behind all the financial problems. Germany was not able to pay their bills, so many companies went bankrupt and unemployment figures rose sharply. Companies who were still in business had to tighten their budgets, new investments were out of the question, employees had to accept pay cuts, and owners were trying to avoid hiring new workers. Unemployment was an issue that added on to the Weimar Republic financial worries, so preserving unemployment insurance became a serious issue. In the winter of 1928 to 1929, signs of recession began to peak and unemployment rose to 3 million, while the Reich institution had insufficient funds and owed the state 342 million marks in government-loaned money. In December of 1929, the National Association of German Industry attacked the structure of Weimar's social and economic policy. Buring, as always others, cut spending and raised taxes which lowered the demand of the economy, but there was still a rise in unemployment. In 1931, there was a German banking crisis which furthered the unemployment, which caused a massive exodus of cash from Germany. Even with the arrival of Adolf Hitler, the Germans still experienced a prolonged period of uncertainty that only recovered in the mid-1930s. However, Hitler was able to reduce unemployment by introducing conscription, which created Nazi labor schemes that introduced huge public building programs. In the 1920s, there was an increased demand for non-labor, and there was also a growth in mass production that required unskilled labor. Employers who were now stronger to the idea of employing women in these types of jobs, for female employees were paid less than a male employee. The new woman was seen as someone who worked and began to love all American things, and these women seemed to represent the new female emancipation of Weimar. However, the new woman triggered fears of moral and cultural decay, which thus fear was part of the ongoing political, social, and cultural clash between conservative forces and more liberal, social, democratic-minded members of Weimar society. In the Weimar Republic, there was ongoing debate between the left and the right about changes in gender roles, with many people having the desire of the return of traditional social roles. There was a moral decline and the end of the family because of rising numbers in workplace, growing divorce, decreasing abortion rates, and a more liberal approach to sex and sexual imagery. Women tried to keep their families together despite the conflicts that were caused because of unemployment, impoverishment, and intergenerational disagreements about politics.
I am Rosa Luxemburg. We were German socialists of Jewish origin.
And I am Karl Liebknecht. We co-founders of the Spartacus League and the Communist Party of Germany.
From its birth in 1918, the Weimar Republic faced numerous political problems for which the causes were many and varied. These problems included political instability and deep divisions within society, as well as economic crisis. The German Social Democratic Party, which controlled the Reichstag and revolutionary wings. The left-wing attempt to overthrow Weimar took place in January 1919, when the Spartacists, led by Eugene Levine, Rosa Luxemburg, and Karl Liebknecht, attempted to overthrow the government and establish a workers' republic by means of an armed uprising in the capital, Berlin. Right-wing attempts to overthrow the government were rooted in the belief that Weimar had betrayed Germany. There was a feeling that the German army had been willing and able to continue fighting, but that they had been stabbed in the back by German politicians, mainly Social Democrats, who had surrendered and signed the Treaty of Versailles. The most important economic impact of the Treaty of Versailles was its demands that Germany pay compensation for war damage. The amount was eventually fixed by the Allies at 132 billion Deutschmarks. Weimar no longer had sufficient resources to support the German economy, but continued to print paper money. This caused rapid inflation, which was used as an excuse not to pay the second installment of the reparations. The French decided to force payment by sending French and Belgian troops, industrial heartland of Germany, the Ruhr, to collect reparations still owing. The German Chancellor called for passive resistance by the workers of the Ruhr, namely a refusal to cooperate with the troops. This led to the collapse of the German economy as the government was forced to print more paper money in order to pay the striking Ruhr workers. As massive unemployment spread within Germany, industrialists, the military, and the rural agriculture, Protestant interests, all anxious for a solution, were in the ascendant. They were very much in sympathy with the Nazi Party, which was now efficiently funded, organized, and, since 1930, electorally strong, and so became the unified vanguard of the nationalist right. Ethnic minorities and their rights under Weimar were central to the cause of peace in 1918 and 1919, and in helping the Republic establish its credentials. Attempts to promote a sense of Jewish identity in Germany differed in important aspects from life in Eastern Europe. German Jews developed no trade unions and very few professional associations. Although many individual Jews enjoyed acclaim in the arts, cultural activities such as music and theater, they were only rarely organized. Gender politics and the roles women played in Weimar public life became increasingly important. Newly enfranchised women began to feature in the mainstream political activities and debates of the Republic, rather than just being involved with extremist groups like Rosa Luxemburg of the Spartacists. In many cases, women had taken over the leadership role in the family, while their men were away at war. The German Empire of 1871 permitted basic religious freedom for individuals. The Weimar Constitution of 1919 specifically defined individual freedom of religion in Articles 136 and 137. At the end of 1918, the Weimar Republic attempted to deprive the Church of its status and its control of education. The Nazis needed the backing of both Catholics and Protestants in order to gain political power. The Church was being prepared for the Nazi takeover, and people were encouraged to view Hitler as a man of destiny and a savior who would keep Germany's sanctity intact by ensuring its racial purity. The perceived decadence and persistentness of Weimar caused many to look to the German Church for salvation.
Are we gonna do the thing first?
No, you do this and then we do the thing.
No, your thing of this. Are we gonna do this?
You turn it.
No, no, wait, I lost it. I lost it.
Watch it. This is all the watch this started.
and died 1970. I was Chancellor from...
I am Frederick Ebert. I was born in the year 1871 and died... Ah, no, I touched it.
Bye. I am Hitler. I am Adolf Hitler. Okay, sorry.
And look straight at the camera.
Shut up, she just started.